that this was a rogue element within the military, working very clearly outside the chain of command, to the degree that they had started their coup attempt by detaining the chief of staff and the commander of the land force. IS, of course, is another terrorist organization that Turkey has been facing, and we have lost a lot of lives in our fight against the IS. Our cities were bombed. We have centuries-long friendship with the people of the subcontinent, Pakistan, India, all the way to Bangladesh. We have come to support each other in difficult times.
You know, the most topical issue on our mind, less than a week ago, on Friday night, a group of people attempted coup in your country. If you could take us through, because you were in Delhi, you were in India, I mean, it was an odd hour for you, I'm sure. How did you get to know about this news, about this development? Were you anticipating it, or did you get a call from home, or how it panned out? And through the night, take us through that night.
Well, as I'm a night owl, and I was staying up late and came across the kind of reflection of the build-up that was coming on Turkish TV, watched it by scene by scene, starting with the deployment of troops to cut traffic on the Bosphorus Bridge. This was around midnight. And of course, my incredulity turned into resentment and anger towards the morning. And in the morning, I was most kind of thrilled to see that the same vector of going from incredulity to resentment to anger was kind of the overall reaction of the Turkish people. And we have seen some dramatic, I think historic scenes of everyday people taking to the streets, responding to a FaceTime call broadcast through a TV channel by the president, and standing up against the tanks, against the armed military. I was kind of most kind of disturbed to see people in uniform, Turkish military in uniform, on the streets, but then it became even clearer as the day went on that this was a rogue element within the military, working very clearly outside the chain of command, to the degree that they had started their coup attempt by detaining the chief of staff and the commander of the land force, our two top generals. And they were acting on the orders of a terrorist outfit called FETO, Fethullah Gülen Terrorist Organization. And then, of course, things started falling into place also for me. It made no sense for the military to engage in anything like this against the will of the Turkish people. Turkey is governed by a president directly elected for the first time by the Turkish people with 52% vote. Turkey is not a case where people are rebelling in favor of democracy when they had none. Turkish people have come out forward resolutely to defend what they already had. And therefore, I would think this was the 15th of July, was historic for two accounts. On the national scale, basically this is the coming of age, this is the vindication, and this is the proof of how intrinsic, how innate democracy has become, and how irreversible democracy has become for Turkish society. It is the day of victory for the Turkish people who have, over decades, managed to instill this democracy. It is also a historic date from the point of view of global history. It is the doubtful voices that espouse a certain Middle Eastern exceptionalism or Muslim world exceptionalism, the voices that argue that democracy and Muslim society, they are incompatible. These voices, these theories must have been dealt a fatal blow. So it's a victory also for the global history of democracy. I'm hoping that it would set the right example.
How did a group, how was it able to mobilize a significant section of your military, judiciary, civil service, and the population? How and was that a complete, did that take like the government, the Turkish government by surprise, and was that an intelligence failure on your government's part?
I think all of us in Turkey are kind of surprised and taken aback by the extent to which this organization has been able to infiltrate almost all organs of the state machinery. We are a country that have had an uninterrupted sovereignty and statehood for about 1,000 years. And therefore we're very proud of our institutions, of our traditions, of our state organs. That each one of them traces their kind of existence for centuries. How these organs of the state were infiltrated, the judiciary, as you said, massively the media, the educational sector, the police, and as surprisingly, the military. Is kind of something, is a question that I think we are trying to understand fully. Therefore, a massive effort is underway now, is to once and for all get to the bottom of this ordeal and this terrorist organization. What this FETÖ was able to achieve was to remain stealthy all the way through. We are talking about an effort that began in full stealth mode in late 70s, kind of stepped up in the 80s, and people who were kind of introduced into the system around those times have grown slowly in the ranks, and when they assumed a certain position, certain seniority, they have been able to exercise their authorities, and those authorities were in line with the instructions, with the demands and the objectives of this terrorist organization, and what those objectives was ultimately has been proven in a very open and fatal fashion with the attempted coup on July the 15th.
You said there are supporters of Gulen in India and you have Indian government has to watch out for that.
Yes.
What do you base that on? I mean, if only 200 people.
My colleague says 300. This is a guesstimate in the sense that we do not oblige our citizens to come and register with us. So those who have already come for some consular affair or something have reached 300. Of course, when they go back, they don't notify that they're going back. So some of these numbers are not so. Overall, 200-300 people are there. We have come to know that there is a certain FETO presence in India, and this presence is in the form of schools, educational and cultural or business establishments. We have been in touch with the Indian government, and I, for one, do not doubt for a second that India will be sympathetic and cooperative.
Turkey is seen as the bridge between the East and the West. What do you think, in your view, explains the Islamic State and especially the kind of attacks, the lone wolf attacks so far in the West? And if this is the kind of strategy that IS adopts, do you think bombing is going to be the answer? Will that ever win the war against IS?
IS, of course, is another terrorist organization that Turkey has been facing, and we have lost a lot of lives in our fight against the IS. Our cities were bombed. The airport that I always use kind of was attacked. Turkey will continue to very resolutely confront the IS, what we call Daesh. Now, how to deal with a terrorist organization that calls itself Islamic State, recruits not only locally from Iraq and Syria, but also recruits internationally, which includes citizens of countries as diverse as the UK, France, and Central Asian countries. How do you deal with this when you also know that there are a lot of problems that are plaguing the Muslim world? And I don't think there is a single answer to this. At one layer, those who take arms and those who terrorize must be given a military answer. Basically, I think no one is any longer espousing that if you go with a red rose in your hand, the terrorist would just take off his, suicide jacket and then change course and be a Democrat. This is not going to happen. So military security measures will have to be in place and be effective. That is the bombing part, and the coalition aircraft operate from Turkey. We have a base called Incirlik where the coalition aircraft are based, and Turkey is one of the most important elements overall of the fight against the IS. But at the same time, there are other categories and layers of measures that need to be taken. For instance, close to 1/3 of the Daesh fighters are what we call foreign fighters. They come from a diversity of countries. Of course, when you look at the geography, unless they parachute, they have to come from one or two borders. And the longest border on the Syrian and bordering Syria and Iraq is the Turkish border. Now, we have been putting up physical and other kind of impediments to stopping illegal border crossings along this vast, close to 1,200 kilometers of borders. There is now, for instance, a physical barrier, a wall that is being built on a segment of it. It's near completion. But you have to deal it even more effectively. Even more effectively in the sending countries, in the source countries. There are people who are radicalized and then exploited and turned into terrorists in a diversity of European countries. Now, for those who are in the pre-radicalization, pre-terrorization phase, there needs to be other kind of measures, like social integration, dialogue, whatever. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure that the disaffected youth, for this reason or that reason, do not turn into radicals first, and then from radicals to terrorists second. And then once they do, it is incumbent on the source countries' intelligence and security services to identify them and pass the information timely, accurately to the countries from which they will transit, and ultimately to Turkey, of course, from which they will go into Iraq and Syria. And this requires intelligence cooperation. This requires better organization in the source and transit countries. And there is a whole shopping list of items to be done to make sure that there is effective international cooperation. We have to address the root causes, and we have to agree on how to address it jointly. And one point there is, for instance, we are sometimes very dismayed by how some nations are approaching terrorism issue. As everything is unfolding, the PKK terrorist organization opens a photo exhibition in Brussels and opens a tent next to the European Council to raise funds and to raise awareness. Now, when you start tolerating this, tolerating that, and then you're wondering why there's terrorism plague in the world, you have not really understood the issue.
I'm also curious on the Turkish position on the Kashmir issue.
We have centuries-long friendship with the people of the subcontinent, Pakistan, India, all the way to Bangladesh. We have come to support each other in difficult times. I've written about the linkages of the Indian independence movement with Turkey, with India's contribution to Turkey's fight against the imperial powers at the time when Ottomans were at the point of demise. We have very good relations with Pakistan. We have very good relations with India. And there is a dispute that the resolution of which should satisfy the people of Kashmir. We are, of course, yes, part of the OIC. We do subscribe to the statements that come out of the OIC, but never do we really make ourselves part of this. Our sympathies with the Kashmiris, the Pakistanis, and the Indians.